I'm Paul Koretz. I'm chair for a day. Councilmember Bonin is on his honeymoon, so this is my first time chairing T Committee, so if it's a little rough at the edges, don't be surprised. I am here with my colleagues, Councilmember Labange and Councilmember Krikorian, and so we have a quorum. And that being the case, I will suggest that we approve items 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, 11, and 12 on the consent calendar without objection.
We'll have to do that again more slowly. 2,
okay.
4.
2, 4, 5, 6, 8, 11, and 12. And so if there is no objection, those will be approved on consent.
It's good.
Not yet. So let's begin with item number 1.
Item number 1 is the general manager from LADOT to present a verbal report relative to the status of the department's projects and programs and employee recognitions.
Good afternoon, council members, and to the chair. Thank you so much for giving us a moment to recognize our staff as we're trying to start doing once a month. This month, first of all, we are going to recognize from our Public Information Office, Medgar Parrish. And Medgar lost his mother 4 days ago. Medgar, our condolences for the loss of your mother, Barbara. Thank you for being here today. Your LADOT family stands to support you during this trying time. Medgar is LADOT's videographer and photographer. He's produced over 250 videos with approximately 50,000 views in the last 3 years, primarily on YouTube. He depicts positive depictions of our city workforce, providing excellent customer service. And additionally, he produces training videos for our traffic officers, crossing guards, and field crew personnel. Medgar's visual depictions improve employee morale, help stakeholders to navigate department policies and programs, and provide a much-needed positive human face to our customers working with a large city agency. He truly makes a difference on a daily basis. Thank you so much, Medgar, for everything.
Where did that come from?
Well, I think we should clarify. Medgar, are you okay with Councilmember Labange handling that rig? That's a thing of beauty, and I don't know if he's qualified for it.
Hopefully, he didn't do any harm to your camera. And
he's a fine photographer.
Thank you.
And on behalf of the committee, I'd also like to express my heartfelt condolences and all of our condolences. We've heard very good things about your mother, and what a wonderful mother she was, raising 2 sons, and that she loved to walk the city and go on Sunday outings with you, and was just a great person who encouraged you during your football playing years and college years and all of that. So we offer our most sincere condolences.
And our congratulations and thanks on this recognition.
Yes, indeed.
For all the great service that you've provided.
Thanks, Medgar. I'm also going to recognize from Parking Enforcement and Traffic Control our LADOT Communication Center, which provides exceptional customer service citywide. It's operational 24/7, currently staffed with 22 communication information representatives. And they provide dispatch services. They serve as a critical lifeline to help ensure the safety of people out in the field, and functions as the city's 311 service after regular business hours. Last year, the Communications Center received over 200,000 calls for service from Los Angeles residents, our public safety partners at LAPD and LAFD, other city departments, and many outside public agencies. Dispatch operators performed approximately 2.5 million radio broadcasts last year and processed over 55,000 vehicle impounds. Representing the Communications Center today, we have Captain LaTanya Allen, who has led this department through a difficult period and done a commendable job, and our 3 outstanding staff members, Lisa Glover, Stephen Harris, and Araceli Galicia. So thank you so much. And with that, I'd be happy to take questions, but that concludes my report.
Questions or comments, anybody?
I was asking the department for a map of where we move goods. Is there one prepared?
The planning department has it, yes.
No, I want one from transportation department.
So it's in the planning department's mobility plan.
But who's responsible for that, though? The DOT?
Well, the city council, once you hear and approve the mobility plan, would then direct all of the city departments to be responsible for it, including...
Do you have a draft? Because I've asked and not received from your department. So if I could just have a draft, that's all I want.
We'll follow.
Thank you.
And before you go, there's one comment from the public as well. Dennis Hindman.
Hi, hi. My name is Dennis Hyman. The Census Bureau Household Survey results for the year 2000 to 2013 indicate that bicycling has increased its percentage of commuters just as much as transit did. From 2007 to 2013, the percentage of commuters who bicycle to work increased more than the percentage of commuters using transit. Bicycle-involved collisions increased 81% from 2007 to 2013, according to LAPD data. The percentage of commuters using a bicycle doubled in that time period. MIT Media Labs made a map of all bicycle-involved collisions in LA for 2012. These are concentrated in a very small geographical area of the city. This also lists the 25 streets with the highest number of bicycle collisions. It's reasonable to assume that where the highest number of bicycle riders are concentrated tends to be where the highest amount of bicycle collisions are. Mainly applying resources to these areas would tend to reach the most amount of people. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, and thank you, Ms. Reynolds, for your presentation. Item number 3.
Item number 3 is a DOT report relative to the financial impacts to the Special Parking Revenue Fund resulting from the removal of the monthly parking program at Broxton Parking Garage located in Westwood Village, or the Westwood community, and recommendations for negating the revenue loss by eliminating the parking at Broxton.
Welcome.
Council members, Rene Sagos, Parking Facilities Division, LADOT. I'm here to answer questions regarding our report to you regarding the mitigation that we have proposed for the removal of the Broxton monthly parking.
Can you briefly summarize the report?
Well, we are recommending the initial 50% of the total monthlies issued or permit that are for sale, and reduce it to, as I've said, 50%, and that in any incident that there is an issue where there is a push of a transient parker, every month we will reduce it by 15. In impact, that will be in 3 months, there will be no monthly parking in Broxton Garage. This particular program will start in conjunction with the LA Express Park that will be initiated in the Westwood Village. From what I understand and from what I was told, that it would be sometime the middle of March, or at the latest would be first week of April. We also are recommending to mitigate the revenue loss by increasing the flat rate at Broxton based on the recommendation and approval of the budget in 2012.
And this continuing reduction is assuming that those spaces wind up getting filled by transient parkers.
That is correct.
We don't know for sure whether that happens fully, but it's yes, anticipating that. Questions or comments, colleagues?
I have a question. Do you do a report that lists all the parking structures in the city?
We have a matrix that has all the parking lots and structures that are under LADOT.
And what revenue they produce?
We used to do that.
You used to do it. Why don't you do it now?
Unfortunately, I don't have the staff to do it.
Yeah, but you got a computer, and computers could do
understand
that.
that,
I mean,
sir.
I'm just thinking, and I don't mean to be so firm, but I just find it amazing that simple things that we used to do, we don't do anymore. And the information is knowledge is power, and we represent the people of Los Angeles. So to tell the Larchmont Boulevard Association, the Ventura Boulevard Business District, the bids in the area, this is your local lot, this is what it produces, seems like good public information. So I don't know why we don't do that, if there's any reason why we don't do that.
Currently,
And then we have a great new general manager who came south on US 101, pulled into town.
Yes. We can look into whether or not we can go back to doing that on an annual basis. I do think it's a little, it does require somebody to crunch a lot of numbers, pull all that stuff together, track it. But I agree with you. It would be, we would prefer to be transparent and provide that information in a proactive way rather than on a request basis. So we'll take a look at it.
And our mayor is Mr. Technical eye guy, and I just think it's real important because you sell it. And I want to thank your department because what used to be in your guys' districts, now in my districts in Sherman Oaks, and now they've lowered the rate because you weren't getting anything, and you're doing a great job. I just think it's important to be able to tell the value of what all these parcels are. So in the sense of it does. Thank you.
Thank you. And also we have...
And what does that report do? How do you do it? You think you'll have it by April, you think, before you go to budget with the city?
I think that probably what I would suggest is that we could come back to this committee in a month and discuss the sort of mechanics and the timing, schedule, and all that kind of stuff.
But that would be good, because I think it is really simple, because they did it by hand. When there was Wilshire Western, I knew all the parking districts. They did it by hand, they had a number, somebody counted. Now you have this technology, which should be able to make us do it. So Maria, could you note that, so we could have that for the next, thank you.
Sure.
And also we have one speaker from the public, Andrew Thomas of the Westwood Village Improvement Association.
Hi, thank you, council members. Appreciate your time. I'm Andrew Thomas, the Executive Director of the Westwood Business Improvement District. I'd like to thank Councilmember Koretz and his team for introducing the motion asking for a study on the financial impacts. We very much appreciated that. It's the position of my Board of Directors that we would like all of the monthly parkers removed from the Broxton public parking structure in favor of having more spaces available for our visitors and transient parkers. There is quite a bit of monthly parking available within our district. It is not in demand. It doesn't serve a community benefit for it to be in the Broxton public parking structure. It really is a revenue generator and a guaranteed one, and we understand the importance of that. We're not immune, or we're not going to ignore these type of issues that have to do with revenue. We're very open to conversations about rate changes. We also believe that Express Park is going to bring quite a bit of additional revenue to our district. We're very enthusiastic supporters of Express Park in our district, even though it is going to increase revenues or increase the costs of parkers for parkers here in our district. We're also bringing a very expensive and comprehensive wayfinding program to our district that's going to direct people to this public parking structure, which is kind of tucked away. If you're not familiar with it, it's not easy to find, and we're going to make it as easy as it possibly is, and we think this will bring revenue up as well. What we would hope for is a pilot program to launch as soon as Express Park launches. That would go for a period of 1 year, and we'd see how the true impacts of Express Park and removing all the monthly parkers have on Westwood comprehensively. And then once we have that, we can evaluate how to go forward. Thank you.
And just for my colleagues to completely understand the situation, there is a fair amount of excess parking in Westwood, but it's in very inaccessible places. So easy for our monthly parkers to find those places, virtually impossible for our transient visitor parkers to find those places. So it makes great sense for the ongoing economic viability of Westwood Village for the monthly parkers to be in places that are not so accessible, and the daily, occasional transient visitors to be there where they can easily access our businesses. So I think it makes a lot of sense, and I thank DOT for working so closely with us and working so closely with the Westwood business community and the bid to make this happen. And if there are no questions or comments, I'd ask that we approve this motion without objection.
If we could maybe receive and file the motion and then approve the department's recommendations.
Yes,
I think that
we'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you, council members.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 7.
Item number 7 is the city attorney report and ordinance amending section 87.55 of the municipal code to add a definition for for sale signs and to add several streets to the ordinance.
Hello.
Hello.
Bryce Rosaro from Council District 9. The area that we're looking at in CD9 is Gage Boulevard between South Central Avenue and Avalon. It's an industrial area known as the Goodyear Tract. There are several issues in the area. One of them is there is a large center median which people park on. Primarily, the parking on the median is illegal. There's only one, yes, exactly. So that's what drew Councilmember Price's attention to it. He really wanted to start cleaning up the area. To address the lack of parking, one of the things he wanted to do was remove red curbs, so we've been working with DOT to do that. The other issue was LAPD brought it to our attention that on any given day, there's 25 to 35 vehicles for sale that are oftentimes parked for longer than 72 hours. So this is one step to try to bring more parking to the area to alleviate some of the issues along the median so we can start to make improvements.
And can I ask a few questions? You've personally observed these
I've
for sale
actually been
signs?
out there on numerous occasions with different departments trying to look at what solutions we can come up with. It's a heavily traveled road. It's also very high speed going through there. There's also heavy tractor trailers making turns out of the Goodyear tract that don't have wide enough turning radius. So all of these problems have been compounded by the lack of parking. There's also a safety issue with pedestrians because folks are parking on the median and then they're jaywalking to their place of work. So several things are in play to try to get the area cleaned up a little bit and make it safer.
And for the record, you submitted photographs of the area?
Yes, I did. Those photographs are just primarily show the issue on the median. Some of those vehicles are for sale, but mostly they're parked on properly, they're parallel parked along the street. And so that's where we want to really look at taking out the vehicles for sale. Once that we have these measures in play, then we're going to start enforcing the median with DOT.
And have there been a number of business and citizen complaints in the area about the for sale cars?
There's been both. So there is a bid in the area. There is a bid. They have a security bid. They've mentioned the issues. A lot of the businesses that are parking along the median, they have the floor space to actually provide parking. So there's a lot of back and forth about it. For sale vehicles, we don't have a determination whether they're people who are working in the area or if they're people coming from outside the area. But it was also a place where vehicles were often abandoned after they've been stolen as well.
Any questions, colleagues, comments? If not, we have a number.
I just want to say this is a very effective tool, and I hope you get the backup from other parts of Public Works. I know transportation is not tied in with Public Works, but that relationship because the illegal dumping and all the other stuff that goes on there. And the other thing, too, is I'd only suggested looking at the exhibits here, if there's any way to get additional parking. I don't know the traffic patterns, but if you take it off the median and you have diagonal on the street, I don't know if it qualifies because of the driveways, but it's something to look at because everybody's hungry for parking in any area.
And we have a number of speakers from the public. Yolanda Gonzalez, followed by Theresa Marcus.
And also Kevin from City 14.
I filled out a speaker card as well, but I can make my comment at that time.
He's from City 14.
Good afternoon, council members. Kevin Akabi on behalf of Councilmember Weezar's office. Similarly, we experienced some problems on Chavez First, Gage, and Evergreen, which are the streets that basically border Evergreen Cemetery. In recent years, that has become a highly trafficked recreation area. As you know, the Evergreen track that goes around there, and we have been working closely with the city attorney's office, and also our LAPD officers who are here today and can speak for the record if you wish, to address a lot of the problems that have been described. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Could we have them speak to the record? It's required under this ordinance. We have to have the testimony of the officers who have observed. If they could come up and speak.
And I've also personally observed it along Evergreen and First and Lorena.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess we'll have the officers speak next, and then members of the public.
Hello, council members. I'm Officer Tapia from Hollenbeck Station, LAPD. The ongoing problem with the vehicles that are parked there, most of them are not registered to anyone in the area. Some of the time they're stolen vehicles being sold. Also, they avoid the transfer fee by the DMVs. When we run these vehicles, they don't come back to anybody in the area. They're like in between owners, which is usually a used car, some kind of used car sales, which is defrauding the DMV and placing registration tabs that don't belong to the vehicles. It also causes a shortage of parking for the residents in the area who are trying to use the jogging path around the cemetery, along with customers for this El Mercado Plaza. And there's usually anywhere from 25 to 30 vehicles parked within that stretch.
And they all have for sale signs, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else from LAPD? If not, let's try again with members of the public. Yolanda Gonzalez, followed by Theresa Marquez and Bryce Rosario.
Yes, Yolanda Gonzalez, 3168 Wabash Avenue in Boyle Heights. I'm here because it's more than a problem not only selling these cars, but because you have the undocumented that are going to be registering for the license as of January 15th. It's becoming a bigger problem because they're trying to sell the cars to these individuals that are going to be getting these driver's license. But how do we solve this problem? Because they come, they cite them, and they move somewhere else. The city of Los Angeles needs to come up with an ordinance. You want to sell a car in the city of Los Angeles, you're going to have to register it at the Department of Motor Vehicles before you sell it. Because if you sell something, what's going to happen is either that car has already a problem, they're bringing in cars from other states to sell to the undocumented here, and this is why it's increased the number of cars for sale, not only within Boyle Heights, but where there is a bigger where there is a more percentage of people who will be needing these vehicles. I called up Univision the other day. No, it was not Univision, because I wanted to know how was the process of obtaining these licenses, what they needed, and it's different for every individual who comes from a different country. But the one thing that they were not requiring, that if you're going to get a driver's license, you were not required to have car insurance. I'm sorry. I've already been hit by 2 people who are uninsured and don't even have a license. And if you think that these people are going to do it right, they're not going to do it right. But the car sales are going to continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Theresa Marquez.
Good afternoon. My name is Theresa Marcus, and I am a homeowner and a part of Mothers of East LA and part of the many activities there. And I'll tell you, first of all, I totally agree with not allowing cars to be parked there for sales. We have dealerships or dealers that are parking their cars there. But it's not only around a jogging pad, the Evergreen jogging pad. And if you stop them from going there, which I totally agree with you, they're just going to move. They moved from East LA because East LA, Gloria Molina put up those signs. No, you cannot sell your car on the streets. So they just moved over to Evergreen. And not only around Evergreen, jogging pad, but it's down Evergreen, down to to Malabar, and down to Euclid, from Evergreen to Euclid. If you go down Euclid, there's all kinds of sales of cars, down to the freeway, down south of Euclid. So we're just going to move these cars to another location. And I don't know if this is the right thing. We're spending a lot of money to put this in progress and have it legitimate, but we need to cover the other issues. Where are they going to move? And Don Lorena, which is starting at the jogging pad from Cesar Chavez, all the way to Olympic. At Resurrection, I work with Father Moreta in Resurrection, and there's constantly complaints there. The people come and say there's all kinds of cars parked here for sales, trucks, and they're taking up our parking. So there's a problem greater than that Evergreen jogging pad. And that's all I want, is I want you to expand it. Thank you.
Thank you. Bryce Rosario? Oh. Okay. Cynthia Tapia? Okay. Rita Govia Rodriguez?
Good afternoon. My name is Rita Govea Rodriguez. I am a Boyle Heights stakeholder. I was also on the Review Advisory Committee for the Goal Line to the East Side. This needs to be expanded to all major streets. No selling of vehicles on any major street, because it's just spreading and spreading. I live on North Indiana. They are selling vehicles on South Indiana that goes all the way down to Olympic. They're selling cars on Olympic, on 7th Street, on 4th Street, just about every major street that you can name. So it really needs to go the whole city of LA, no selling of any vehicles, trucks, vans on public highways. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's something that could be explored at a later date, but...
Council member, I can actually respond to that. We cannot ban them across the city. State law permits us to ban them on certain streets as long as we can establish that it is causing a problem on those certain streets. The problems including traffic, increased traffic congestion, parking problems, fights being caused by the people that are selling them with the residents or the businesses. But under case law, the city can't ban them citywide because we wouldn't be able to prove on every street that it was a problem on every street. And there was a case in 2000, it's called Burkhal versus City of Los Angeles, where an injunction was issued against the city's old ordinance, and because the court found that they do have a First Amendment right to place a for sale sign in their car, but that the city could, if it established by evidence and by testimony that it was causing a certain problem at certain areas, that we could ban them on those streets.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. City Attorney, for that clarification. Any other questions or comments from colleagues? If not, I'd ask that we approve the revised ordinance without objection. Item number 9.
Item number 9 is a Labange-O'Farrell motion requesting Caltrans to report with recommendations for enhancing the significance and accessibility of portions of Route 66, and the Economic and Workforce Development Department to report relative to the status of the Hollywood Route 66 Business Improvement District.
The Department of Transportation has had a great record in recognizing historic monuments as well as historic highways. Route 66 is one of the most historic, the mother lode from Chicago to LA. And this is just to get recognition to look at that. It was an effort by predecessors. I believe John Fisher was the leader in this recognition of historic highways. And what I'm asking for is the department to look at this and see if we can enhance that to make people awareness of these great roads that have been part of our history in Los Angeles. I don't see anybody from the department up here, but if somebody wants to, Zaki Mustafa, who was praised at the last meeting that I was at here by Mr. Bonin, and gave me, call 1-800-ZAKI Mustafa. That's what I think is the word.
On this item, Zaki Mustafa, Department of Transportation, Councilman will look into this matter and see how we can enhance the beauty of that street.
At the street and add to the history and character. Thank you so much. Mr. Krikorian, Mr. Koretz, I ask for your support.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
We like Route 66. I'm good with Route 66.
I enjoy driving on Route 66. So we will approve item 9 without objection. Item number 10.
Item number 10 is the Labange-Bonin motion instructing DOT in conjunction with Caltrans to report relative to alleviating traffic congestion on the Los Angeles Freeway system at pinch points to improve safety and maintain reliable travel times.
Do we have staff to speak to this?
Is someone here from Caltrans? Sergeant, see if there's a fellow from Caltrans outside, by chance, because they did say.
If not, Mr. Labange, we'll have to rely on you to...
Well, basically, just on one thing, and if you witnessed, we just spent over billions of dollars on the the San Diego Freeway with the carpool lane and all that. And here's Daniel and our friend from Caltrans. We're calling the item. Basically, I just started speaking about that. The freeway system is intricate to us. But can you name anyone in the state, Mr. Chair, that is the champion of freeways anymore? No one. They seem to be an orphan. Yet still, it does move our community. So what I'm asking for is a heightened awareness to see how we can improve and state, because Doug Phelan, who's recently retired from the MTA, was a former Division 7. Are you 7? Is that correct?
Correct.
He was the Division 7 guy. Jerry Baxter. How long has Jerry Baxter been gone?
Probably 15, 20 years.
20 years or whatever. Always trying to get something done where you have these choke points that have to be recognized. And I don't know, does anyone in the city, in the Department of Transportation, look at freeway systems and say anything about them?
Dan Mitchell with Department of Transportation. No, at this time, that's not our focus. Our primary focus and responsibility is on where the freeway system interacts with the city street system. And so on and off ramps, where those interactions take place.
Right. When I started,
the freeway system itself.
I understand. When I started earlier, I spoke of all the work in the San Fernando Valley still needs work on the freeway systems because it still has challenges coming off the San Diego Freeway, in the heart of the valley and the short loops and the turns, et cetera. I just wanted to bring this to the attention of the committee. No one's going to speak to this yet. It's a multi-billion-dollar investment that we've made that no one from the city is speaking on the issues. You see what happened the other day with the tragedy of the fire and the impacts to the Civic Center. I just think someone should, because it's through the city property of Los Angeles, through the city limit of Los Angeles. I think there should be some voice. And I don't know what the general manager feels about that at all. Since you're here, I'll ask you. And if council could give you some direction. There's certain points that are a checkpoint, a choke point. There's certain unbroken parts of the freeway system that, have we given up totally on freeways, or are we going to try to correct some freeways?
I think our position is, as we put in our strategic plan, that Caltrans is clearly the lead on freeways. And I think that Caltrans would probably disagree with you that there is no champion for freeways. I think that is one of Caltrans' primary functions, and our role is to partner with them as much as possible because, as Dan described, how the on and off ramps function is directly related to how the freeway functions. So we certainly have, an interest in making sure that our city streets don't serve as a queuing parking storage area for the freeway. And from that perspective, we are very interested and involved. And we also have several state routes that run through our city where we want to partner as much as we can with Caltrans. And the District 7 staff is outstanding. They've been fantastic to work with. Their leader, Carrie Bowen, is a great leader for that group. So I think that there are a lot of opportunities for us to partner. I don't, and I think that we do care about and investigate those freeway choke points because they directly impact our city streets. But I wouldn't say that it would be appropriate for us to take a leadership role on that.
No, but just to be a voice. That's all I'm saying.
Sure.
Just to be a voice that these are to identify. Maybe at some future point, you could have all your district engineers, and you know it, because I don't think there's a voice. Not everybody's doing work, and I'm not criticizing anyone and all that, but I don't think it needs to be a voice. The Hollywood Freeway is the 1955 construction of the Hollywood Freeway and its impact, how it was designed. It was designed by the city of Los Angeles, built by a private contractor, but designed by the city. So and there's some missing links that really have a challenge. In our area, which I share with Mr. Krikorian, there's no connector from the Hollywood Freeway to the Ventura Freeway, so these the city streets become de facto connector roads. Barham Boulevard. In the Silver Lake District, Fletcher, Rowena, Hyperion become de facto connectors to what is there, and what is our long-range impact or discussion to see what could be done to try to meet these. I think and this predates your arrival, because I just wanted to state that there's something I've been kicking around a lot with the department and say, okay, let's see what we could do to identify and work with the state areas. The Hollywood Freeway, guarantee you, if you were playing the lotto, you would win every time. Gets clogged up at Melrose every day at 2:15. Why? Why? Because the on-ramps at Vermont and the short on-ramps at Silver Lake. But is anybody talking about that? And it does take a lot of time. And then further, I want Mr. Krikorian work with Mr. Adrien Nazarian, the fine assemblyman for the East San Fernando Valley, because when we had the earthquake in 1994, they fixed these freeways within 27 to 45 days because there was an emergency. Right now on the 101 and the 170 and the 134 where it is, you go from a 5-lane highway to a 2-lane highway, and most of the traffic goes east-west from the Glendale, Pasadena area through there, 2 lanes. I want to have somebody say, hey, this is impacted because people jump off the freeway to go on the streets, and say, could we call this an emergency just like we did in 1994 and have an environmental, if it's within the existing right-of-way, I'm not talking about taking people's land, but create that extra lane there because that causes congestion. So I think we just need to not say that freeways are obsolete. I don't know what percentage of people drive on freeways, but I think it's well into the 80s, if not 90%, and I think it's something that infects our city, So, and like, what's our plan, Dan, for the Harbor Way, the Harbor Expressway that ends right at Adams? What is the Department of Transportation's hope for the future of that? I mean, that's a big thing, and you can say, well, it's not ours, but it stops right there at Adams, and is it going to ever come into the city? I'm not talking about doing the work. I'm just talking we should identify it, because if we don't, there's a whole component. Another thing, too, I've asked the department and the mayor's office of the Los Angeles River to look at all the washes and other county-owned lands that water runs on that they have a right-of-way. And adjacent to the right-of-way, you could put a bikeway. And if you put a bikeway, then you make a connector. So there's things that we're not looking at that we should be looking at. So that's why I'm glad Mr. Bonin, who is chairman, scheduled this so that we could at least discuss it. Because I think it's maybe something you want to look at. And if I know Ms. Bowen, and I know you, maybe I could help facilitate a meeting to say what makes sense. Because I don't think there's anybody voicing it.
Councilmember, if I can
Sure.
answer your question. By the way, Ali Zagari, I'm the Deputy for Traffic Operations, District 7. On the Adams question, we have a project that's being initiated to construct a flyover to alleviate the congestion that is caused as a result of the intersection between Adams and Figueroa. So this flyover actually would take the express lanes directly onto Figueroa and will alleviate the congestion considerably. So I think that's really good news.
Good. Does Mr. Mitchell know about that?
Yes.
And does it fit in with my Figueroa?
Well, those have been the discussions between
Okay.
Caltrans and Metro and the city.
Yeah, okay. That's all right.
Yes,
You
that
know.
everyone understands the
Yeah.
impacts, and I believe that was taken into account in the study that was done for my Figueroa.
I got it, but I think that, and it will be built when your sons have an ability to get a driver's license, right? It'll be that way? Okay. Thank you.
Just
if
an
I can
extra
add-
more-
I'm sorry.
extra more minor element of this. I know we've all noticed during rush hour on some on-ramps and some off-ramps, and this goes both ways, that sometimes city streets are the extreme queuing lanes to get on the freeway where it might back up 20 cars, and really I think Caltrans needs to adjust for that and find ways to make the highway their queuing lane or add that traffic in and not abuse the city streets. At the same time, we've also all seen this happen on the freeway where you might have a 20, 30 car backup to try and get off of an off-ramp. And I think it's probably the city's responsibility to take a closer look at that and find ways to change signal timing to help move some of those cars off. So I think if we have a way to look at that issue in both directions, I think with a little coordination, we can improve that problem.
If I could just add one comment as well. A lot of times at on and off ramps, we see some of our most severe safety problems because people getting onto and coming off of the freeway have a freeway mentality, and we haven't done a very good job at designing those entrance and exit points to really signal strongly to drivers that they're now entering a neighborhood or that they need to maintain a respectful speed until they leave the neighborhood. And that is an opportunity where we have a lot of work to do, and as part of our strategic plan, we're trying to get to zero traffic deaths by 2025. Freeway on and off ramps are going to be really critical to our success in being able to do that. Sometimes when we design a roadway to accommodate the worst congestion, an unintentional side effect is that when the congestion isn't there, the speeds are really high. So we have to be really thoughtful about keeping those things in balance, because safety is really the number one priority and trying to get to that very ambitious goal. And I know that Caltrans is really interested and eager to partner with us on that.
A very good point. Mr. Krikorian, anything you'd like to add? No. We have one speaker, John Howland from the Central City Association.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I'm John Howland with CCA. We support this item and would ask that in fact, Mr. Labange, I'm sure that I can speak for Carol Schatz and say she likes freeways. We would ask that the city also consider ways to help implement those interchange projects that are already in the pipeline, not just do a study, but there are some that have been working on. For example, CCA has spent the better part of the previous decade advocating for a new auxiliary lane on the northbound 101 Hollywood Freeway between the 101-110 interchange and Echo Park Avenue, Glendale Boulevard. CCA raised several $100,000, which helped to pay for a Caltrans project study review that was completed in June 2013, but there was no funding allocated in Caltrans' budget for the EIR or construction. Ali to my left has been very helpful in trying to find ways that we can at least accomplish part of our goals, but quite simply there's no money in the Caltrans budget for congestion relief. This segment experiences significant congestion and delay during peak commute hours due to frequent weaving and merging movement of vehicles entering the 101 from the northbound and southbound 110 freeway. This project would reduce the delays by reducing the weaving, basically having two lanes go farther instead of that one merging, and to continuing it up for about 3/4 of a mile, and it will improve traffic both into and through downtown. Many people traveling from the San Gabriel Valley to jobs on the west side, for example. Total costs are estimated somewhere between $25 and $35 million, taking about 18 to 24 months to do. This project would conform with the current City of LA bike plan as well as Caltrans Master Highway Design Manual. This was on Caltrans' 2008 long-range transportation plan. For some reason that nobody can quite pinpoint, it fell off the 2012 long-range wish list. So we've been trying to work with Caltrans, with Metro, with some members of LADOT to get this back on that wish list. Would like the support of this committee. Would also encourage support for Mr. Labange and Mr. Bonin's motion, and ask that and suggest that the city also look at some other projects similar to this that might also be in the pipeline.
Well, I just suggest, Mr. Chair, if I could, with the general manager and assignment, maybe Mr. Mitchell or other, let's map what's simple. We're not talking about big land takes. We're talking about within the existing right-of-way, and what are some of the choke points. You know, I talk to the Highway Patrol sometimes, and they could tell me all these little things, get everybody in a room and come back to this committee in 60 days with a map, just to start to say this is a plan that we can look at of existing stuff. If that meets my colleague's approval.
If there's no objections, we'll move that item with that.
Any objection, Mr. Krikorian?
I guess I just looked to the department with regard to feasibility.
We're really not the appropriate department to lead creating a map.
Well, I'm going to ask you to be the appropriate department to work with him. Absolutely, but you got to be our voice. Okay, you got to be our voice. You're the Department of Transportation. I just find it difficult to not feel the support from our Department of Transportation that has to move people. I mean, this is something in goods movement, in this simple project here, and I know you're new to Los Angeles, but you'll get home in a modest time if you don't have a choke point. And that's the only thing that I'm saying, and no one stands up. You know, we're standing up for a lot of things, but I think you stand up for your largest investment, it helps everybody.
We would certainly work with Caltrans to get them to help create that information.
Great.
Well, thank you. And so without objection, we have approved that motion with the direction to continue for.
But I think it's real important, committee members, that we ask the department to do things. And if we need to go to council, so you know exactly, because I'm not the only council person, but this is not the only freeway point, that we can look at things, you know, that are out there. Look at all the work, you know, that's being done throughout the whole area. So,
I agree, Mr. Labange. I just want to make clear, though, that this is a department that has been decimated by budget cuts, that has tremendous increased demands because of council requests on its workload. And this is, the freeway is simply not within its jurisdiction, except to the extent that it has impacts on the streets. So if the request is that the department is going to ask Caltrans to give us a report back on those pinch points, I think we need to do that. And then the department, I think, you know, to the extent that you have information regarding street impacts to like Mr. Koretz was just saying, and we all have them in our districts, and we have those street impacts. If we can identify those and target places that we can work with Caltrans to relieve those street impacts, then I think that's a focused kind of effort that the department should be charged with. I just don't want to reinvent the wheel, because we have the mayor, Mr. Bonin, myself, sit on the Metro Board with Kerry. The Metro Board does work on freeway issues with Caltrans. And at a time when we're all trying to get the department to stripe our streets, I don't want to devote a lot of resources to have them reinventing work that Caltrans should be doing. So
I understand that, but I think if there's somebody, and I know Mr. Mitchell, and you have others who are very familiar, who've driven our freeways, and they know the points. You get the MTA involved, you get the CHP involved, you have a 2-hour meeting, you post them on a map, you take it to engineering, and you got a map where the pinch points are. And then it gives a road map, if I could use that term, as how we should go. If no one speaks to it, Paul, Mr. Krikorian, nothing happens. And I think it's important that we speak to it. That's why it's taken a while to get this here, because this is a whole combination of things.
And I don't think anyone's disagreeing. I think we all recognize we can provide some leadership without having to put in very exhaustive resources. Yeah. So I think DOT can serve a function as a little red hot poker in the right direction, and someone to bring everybody together to focus on this, and where we see the best opportunities where we can jointly work together to solve some of these choke points. I think we will.
And just to close that loop, that is part of our strategic plan, as Councilmember Krikorian described. And we do have a specific benchmarks that we want to get to around choke points, because we recognize just how critical that is to goods and people movement. I just want to be mindful that, we cannot take on the freeways at this point.
Yeah, I'm just taking a map and I'm putting post-its up there. And we'll go see a map maker and we'll adjust it so everybody could know, and then someone could speak to it. Because if no one speaks to it, nothing happens. No one spoke to the West Los Angeles, and now we have nothing but congestion in West Los Angeles. So,
Councilmember, if I may, we do have that information on an annual basis. So we can put together a map that is more specifically
Can you please just give us
focused on
last year's report? Can you send that to the general manager within 1 week?
no, I'll have Debbie walk over right now with
General
you.
manager can deliver that
Debbie
back.
walk over. We want it too. You want it too, Paul?
Thank you.
You want it too?
So if,
Bring it back.
great.
Yeah, but get some copies for council members. Information is knowledge is
Oh,
power.
and let's have it in here so we can have a discussion about next steps on those points. But the point is that is data that Caltrans should have, and we hope we will be getting. So,
And based on all this discussion, we will bring this back in 60 days, hopefully, with some of this information.
And our best to Miss Bowen. Thank you.
Indeed. Item number 13.
Item number 13 is a correspondence motion requesting the city attorney and DOT to report with recommendations regarding alleviating parking problems arising from the use of valet services hired to assist the guests of events held in nearby no parking areas.
And do we have staff to speak to this item?
Good afternoon, council members. Richard T. Fank, Executive Director of the Board of Police Commissioners. I'll be happy to respond to questions about the police permitting process of valet services. I'm not prepared to respond to the specific issues that have raised this item to the agenda because we don't have significant background. I have some general background, but I'll be happy to talk about the valet operator permit program. The basics for a valet operator is a valet operator that provides services in the city of Los Angeles, whether for a fee or not, must have a valet operator permit, and any attendants who park vehicles for that operator, those attendants must have a valet attendant permit. The exception to that is within the ordinance, no permit shall be required under this section, which is the ordinance, if the valet parking operator is providing services to a non-reoccurring special event at a private residence. So what that means is if the individual is having an event at a residence, a private residence, the operator is not required to have a valet operator permit. The attendants would not be required to be permitted, nor would they have to have a parking plan for those vehicles that are taken from the individuals who drop the vehicle off and are parked somewhere. That was an exemption that came about through the council vetting process as the ordinance found its way through and ultimately was adopted by the council. So that is the one exception that might play a role in the issue as I understand this issue, is that the valet services are being provided at a private residence. So therefore, under the ordinance, there is an exemption to an operator being required to have a permit, and all the requirements within the ordinance would be an exception because it's at a private residence. The key to that becomes then non-reoccurring and the definition of non-reoccurring. And does that mean a different operator is providing services for a different event at a private residence? So we have a residence and Mr. Jones has a fundraiser one evening, Mr. Smith has a fundraiser another evening, Mr. Doe the next evening. Are those events that are separate because the residence is not the entity that is permitted? It is the operator who is permitted. Just as we don't permit a business, a restaurant, we don't permit the business. We permit the operator who must provide a contract with a business. So based on what we understand of the issues that have raised this coming forward, it will take basically an investigation by my staff to, one, determine is a valet operator permit required, and two, if it is required, is the operator operating within the confines of the ordinance as currently constructed? So that's kind of some opening. I'll be happy to answer any questions about anything in particular you would have.
Thank you. Would you like to add anything?
I'm here for the next item. I don't know what they asked.
No, I think the Department of Transportation has been working with your office, and they have some suggestions in terms of how to alleviate the problems. We should also look at whether these are reoccurring and clarify that when we report back. So the department will report back if you approve the motion.
Okay, and I know there had been some discussion of one piece of the motion, which is relating to allowing for relaxed parking as part of that, and I think the consensus was that that's probably not a productive solution. So as it moves forward, we should probably remove that element of it. I know that at least. Any other comments?
I just wanted to say on the valets, I want to make sure they have vests on, safety vests. Some of them don't. They're dressed in all dark, and it's an unsafe issue. I know we lost the valet out on Ventura Boulevard in the Sherman Oaks, Studio City area.
They're required to have a vest on. If our officers see them without a vest, they're issued a citation.
Got it.
That's
And
very
then
straightforward
also,
and simple.
Officer who was killed on Riverside Drive at the Hyperion Bridge, who was changed the state law, which is so important to remember him and all those who've been hurt.
Just as a point of reference, the program actually began the first part of this year was the ordinance became effective in November of 2013. We began enforcement in January of this year. And right now, we're just under 200 valet operators that are permitted and about 1,500 valet attendants that are permitted. We're getting very good compliance. As we find out of violations, we go out very proactively to try and get people into compliance. As I tell folks, we're a city that has been around a long time, and we've never regulated valets, and now trying to get it regulated at one time becomes very difficult, particularly when there's limited parking available in certain areas of the cities where we're trying to get the vehicles off the street, off of the public curbs, and onto parking lots, collect our parking occupancy tax. So it's a very large problem, but I think we've done a very good job in cooperation with Department of Transportation and certainly the business community in regulating valets and bringing it into compliance.
Thank you. And we have one member of the public who would like to speak as well. If you could state your name for the record and then fill out a card after you're done.
Thank you for your time. My name is Dennis Rosenblatt, and I'm on the board of the Holmby Westwood Property Association. Basically, in a nutshell, a little over 2 years ago, ordinances were changed within Bel Air that was mostly driven by LAFD, who said that some of the winding roads in there were not conducive to allowing valet parking because it created a hazard for fire trucks and emergency vehicles to get up into some of these narrow hills. So basically what they did was they said these roads are not permittable for valet use. They need to be kept clear for emergency vehicles. The net result of that was that the party parking from Bel Air moved into Holmby Westwood in a big way. I provided a couple of photos for you gentlemen that I think you have. So we've been the recipient of anywhere from 50 or more cars on multiple weekends. So basically, we've been working with Councilman Koretz and his office to figure out a way to provide relief. As the gentleman mentioned, there was a valet ordinance passed, and the valet ordinance also stipulated that whereas use of public streets and public rights-of-way for valet parking may provide a benefit for making parking more convenient, it may also impede the travel, interfere with the rights of others using the streets and public rights-of-way, and may affect public safety and create a public nuisance. Well, this has in fact created a public nuisance. And this ordinance, as I'm sure you gentlemen will recall, pardon me guys, was basically drafted to fix taxation issues with valets who were skipping out on paying their taxes on them. We worked with the council office. Basically, there are whole sections of the neighborhood that are taken over on a regular basis by valets who are basically moving in and using the neighborhood as their parking lot. Not unlike the Bel Air Mansion, which is also nearby, had a similar problem. But what they did was, instead of filling up the neighborhood, they chose to use parking lots and contract with those parking lots, of which there are numerous located around Westwood and the immediate area, in order to park these cars and not basically, fill up the Homeby Westwood neighborhood streets with them. We've had conversations with the valet companies. Basically, they're hired by the people who are throwing the parties. The people who are throwing the parties' motivation is to spend the least amount of money as possible on parking. And so as long as they're legally able to fill up our neighborhoods and then shuttle their guests up into the hills to these events, that's what they're going to do. The valet parking companies don't like it because it's harder for them. They would rather use the lots, but it's all kind of cost-driven. I'd be happy to answer any questions or clarify anything.
Any questions, comments, colleagues?
I have a comment, but not for the public speaker. I just wanted to strongly second Mr. Labange's concerns about vests, and for the same reason, because as I drive Ventura Boulevard, I see it on a nightly basis, the valets running across the boulevard to go to get cars with dark clothes on often, and it's really only a matter of time before there's serious accidents. So, Mr. Tiefenk, how is that enforced?
It can be enforced by any Los Angeles police officer, just not by our personnel.
But who gets the citation?
The valet attendant, because it is a regulation for the attendant. The attendant must have their own permit, and part of that is that the attendant must wear a vest. If the vest is not worn by the attendant, then the vest is in violation.
Okay.
We would also then, if we had an attendant who is cited, and it comes to our attention that an attendant was cited for not having a vest, then we could begin a process to bring in the valet operator for a low-level office conference to remind them of the compliance necessary by their attendants of all the ordinance requirements, et cetera, and then begin a progressive discipline piece. But it is the responsibility of the attendant, because oftentimes the operator is not at the scene. They're basically running a business, and so their attendants are the ones that have to have the vest. They all go to a class. They are all explained the rules. They all understand what the rules are. To say they don't know the rules is not accurate. They are all provided that. They must attend a 4-hour class before they even apply for the position.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, with all that being said, without objection, we will approve this motion. Item number 14.
Item number 14 is a DOT report relative to submitting grant applications to Metro for the 2015 call for projects and proposed projects.
Good afternoon. Arsen Mangasarian from Department of Transportation. The item number 14 is a request from Department of Transportation to authorize General Manager, Department of Transportation to submit grant applications to Metropolitan Transportation Authority to compete for the 2015 call for project grants. Attached to your report is a list of projects that has been evaluated and ranked by the Interdepartmental Task Force Committee, and the projects above the line are the ones that are proposed to be submitted to Metro for competition.
I believe the department wanted to eliminate some projects.
Yeah, there are revisions to the report which came to our attention after the report was prepared. Metro has postponed the application deadline from January 16th to January 30th, so we have 2 more weeks to prepare the applications, which is good news.
So do I have time to add a few more requests then?
As long as it's few more. The other revision is the Department of Transportation is requesting 2 projects be removed from this list. This list was approved by the Task Force Committee, so I had to bring this list as it was represented at the Task Force Committee to your attention. So we're requesting 2 projects be removed from the list. These 2 projects were proposed by LADOT Department of Transportation, and they are citywide projects, so they don't really affect one particular location in the city. These two projects are project number 1 in the TDM category. Can't find it in this.
It's on page 2.
The bridging bike share accessibility, and also one project from a similar project for bike share from the bicycle improvement category. That project is number 4, bike share phase 2 expansion. The reason to request to remove these projects from competing was that, for Metro, these projects would not be counted towards our share of what we have to pay, what the city has to pay as part of the bike share program. So they would not count this as our share. So it would not make sense for us to compete within each other. So that's why we're removing this project from the list.
Other questions? Mr. Obond.
Yes, on this exhibit, which is this exhibit here,
Yes.
could you describe number 5?
Eastbound Las Feliz Boulevard and Riverside Drive right turn pocket. That's a project that is going to be competing in the regional significant category, RSTI. This project was submitted by, I believe, by your staff to compete for this project.
Right, and this is the, right by the Mulholland Fountain, right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, and then number 9?
Intersection improvements, Hyperion Avenue Road. This project was proposed by Bureau of Engineering, the bridge group, to do this project.
Right.
It's going to compete in the goods movement category.
Got it, thank you.
And we have a number of speakers, starting with Tet Hayes. If I am reading a hard-to-read card. Is that the right name?
Okay, I'll come.
Followed by Sharon Lowe. We have
This is our first opportunity to let you know when you should know something about the Metro Crenshaw line. First of all, the Metro LAX line, and as you no doubt know, it does not go to the airport. But Metro has disguised it with that term so that all the persons in the LA surrounding area will believe they might benefit by this train. The black community, I don't know about the Hispanic, but the black community is entirely opposed to it because we know what happens when you put a train on the ground, they call it at grade, and run it. From Wikipedia, over 100 motorists and pedestrians have been killed by the Blue Line level crossing since 1990. There have been more than 800 collisions, making the line easily the deadliest and most collision-prone line in the country. The Crenshaw line goes up and down 5 times before it gets to where the Green Line currently stops. It does not go to the airport. Now, considering the death toll, why would anybody put a train on the ground in this modern era? The first anybody we're talking about is Mark Ridley Thomas. He sits on the board, as well as 3 council members. And he knows what's going to happen to the people in his district when this happens. Now, what we're proposing is it be underground all the way. As you no doubt know, Beverly Hills says they don't want it under the ground past their school. Well, it goes on the ground a half a block away from Crenshaw High School. So I would like to meet with your deputy and discuss this because we would like, as a group, to discuss this issue with our city representatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hayes, I assume you were speaking under public comment as opposed to the call for projects, because that didn't seem to have that much to do with it.
Maybe you didn't hear me. We have a project. We want to eliminate the manner in which the train is flowing. I don't know what the extent of projects are. I went to find the information you have before you back there, and as you no doubt know, the Brown Act requires everything you have before you to be available for the public. So at some time, if Mr. White can avail it to me, I'll be happy to receive it, to know what you're talking about, so you know what I'm talking about.
Thank you. I will take that as a public comment.
Sharon Lowe, on behalf of Council District 1.
Yes.
I'm here to speak in support of the recommendations by the Department of Transportation, and I want to especially acknowledge the hard work of the entire city team that worked on this and pulling this together over the past 2 months. I would hope that we would not change the recommendations. The staff took a significant amount of time over the past 2 months to apprise each of our council offices. We participated in the larger task force committee, and we were each given an opportunity to submit our recommendations, our nominations, and it was vetted by the departments, each in a modal category. And they did a tremendous amount of work in trying to narrow this down, and recognizing the amount of work that they are subjected to, that they've been carrying for the past with very limited staff. I would hope that we, as council offices, would continue to support our staff on this. I think they've done a great job, and especially that 2-week extension on the application is really minimal compared to the amount of work that they have to do to prepare for this. So on behalf of my boss, Councilmember Cedillo, we would hope you would adhere and support our staff that has done such great work in working with our respective council offices. The only thing I would add is that when they do get a breather after the completion of the application process, that they sit down with each of the council offices again on the projects that were not recommended, on how we can improve our applications for the future, and how they can be maybe participate and be eligible for other funding sources such as the active transportation programs rounds 2 and 3. So thank you.
Thank you. Nate Hayward.
Good afternoon, council members.
Good afternoon.
Thank you all so much. My name is Nate Hayward. I am here representing Councilmember Jose Huizar of the 14th District. First, I'd really like to echo Sharon's words and thank staff, Arson, Garland, Carlos, everybody who put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in doing these applications that I think are essential for our city to really develop it into a world-class city from a public infrastructure standpoint. I'm here to request the committee to amend the report to add another project in, the 6th Street Viaduct pedestrian improvement application. The project is something that we've spoken, Metro is supportive of. It is a $3.75 million project that will help cover ineligibility or potential ineligibility elements for the 6th Street Viaduct and provide linkages to the regional connector that's coming in Little Tokyo. It will not impact any other applications or push anything off being applied for, and will give the city the opportunity to potentially secure funding for the project that will not affect the general fund by bringing this money in. So we would ask the committee to make that amendment. I have Alfred Mata from Bureau of Engineering to answer any technical questions you might have.
Well, the question I would have is, normally we don't add projects after the fact. Why is this in a different situation? I mean, it sounds like a valid project, but if there were a second valid project asking to be added on, why this one in particular?
And if I can add on, particularly because there's already a 6th Street Viaduct project on the list. So why isn't this part of that?
There are two separate applications. The 6th Street Viaduct project, it's CMGC, Construction Management General Contractor, so there's lots of packages of the project, and one of them is off-site intersections. And we had a bunch of intersections we were doing, and Caltrans said, hey, guess what? You can't do some of them, which is what the RSTI application is for, to make up that. So it's a separate component under the same project. In terms of this, there was some miscommunication about the scope of the project. The project description that was submitted to the task force committee was not as accurate as it needed to be, and by the time the committee got the correct project description, it was too late to rank them, to re-rank the project because they'd already ranked them. So that's the answer to your question.
I just feel, and I like to support, I love the 6th Street Bridge, what's happening. I was for saving it, but at the same time, if you listen, there was a process. And in council today, there was a motion for additional projects related to the 6th Street Bridge, which is another fund. I feel more comfortable if we all came to council and Mr. Weezar made the pitch why this is real important, or whatever you guys feel. I just think if everybody put their teamwork together, now there's a grading point. Because there's other stuff too of that bridge that are key. So whatever the majority is, I want to be with the majority.
Well, I understand that this situation occurred because of an error that was not of the council members making necessarily. And as a project that seems like a valid one that would have a reasonable chance of getting funded, I'm hesitant not to add this one. So,
but where are you connecting the pedestrians, though? That's the question.
Well, if you know the existing 6th Street Viaduct, there's the...
Intimately.
There's the existing tunnel approach that goes down into the river, and one of the things that Metro is studying is the potential of adding a in-channel bike path, right? They're doing the study in Metro, and this would allow us to potentially make an ADA ramp accessible through the existing approach into the river, right? And that would help the connectivity for the bike path. At the same time, we're improving the plaza directly under the new viaduct, which provides a whole slew of pedestrian amenities. Hopefully will eventually be a performance space, but will also connect to the regional connector coming in. There's existing projects the city applied for Tiger funds, as well as active transportation, that stop just short of the bridge, right? So this provides this linkage connectivity, and will really set the city up in a position so that...
Here's the thing, out for the river, now you see, I was almost with you, but I want to dike up the river there so water runs from bank to bank, and I don't see a bike lane in the river. I want to see water in the river. So you kind of lost me right there, because I know it intimately, in that sense of what the future should be. So, but again, I'll hear to Mr. Krikorian, who's on the MTA board.
It's a connection to it.
As I think I've made pretty clear, I hate doing things on the fly, and this is news to me. I'm a little confused by your point that this doesn't displace anything else. How can it not? And let me ask staff if we can talk.
Just a little history on this project. This project was submitted under two different categories. That's what Nate was trying to explain. One was under the RSTI category, which scored. That's an RSTI project, scored very well, and it's number one project of the RSTI category.
But that's a separate project than what they're talking about.
There was a separate application, the nomination form submitted for the pedestrian improvement aspect of this project, which did not score well in the ranking. There's nothing more important to the team, the call for project team. The LADOT, Bureau of City Services, Bureau of Engineering, Planning, Bureau of, all people who were involved to submit good applications for the call. I mean, this will give us reward because that project will be approved. But we have to adhere to some kind of a guidelines, and the guidelines were set. There was maybe 5 weeks of period that this project could have been invented, could have been added, could have been discussed, could have been explained better, but it didn't. It just, the way this project was presented, it didn't really score well under the pedestrian improvement category. Now there are new information that has been submitted to us for this project, and it looks it's much better than the original scope of the project. I agree with Nate on that one. But my question here is that, is this additional information going to bring the scoring of this project really high up to pass the 70-point passing point? You know, because we didn't approve any project below the 70 points. So
Yeah, and honestly, I don't have the first idea. I don't have any way of being able to even assess that without staff vetting it, as they've vetted every single project in this, and thoroughly analyzing it, and making a prioritization and comparing. So, you know, I mean, stuff happens, I know, but I'm concerned about reprioritizing things that have been thoroughly considered and vetted by staff at essentially the last minute, the very last minute.
The bridge project itself is over a $300 million bridge.
$400 million.
I think you could find something as you go along. And this is a $3 million call?
And
this is a $200 million call.
No, for your
$3.75 million. It's a
for $4 million.
Yes, that is correct.
I mean, I just think because this is not going to stop. This is a magnificent project. The work that they're doing on top, it's like the Sydney Bridge. You could walk over it, et cetera, et cetera. If this upsets the apple cart as Mr. Krikorian not being vetted, I want to kind of err and try to make us win, because we're competing countywide on this. Is that correct? This is not just us. This is not money due to us.
Then we're the 88 other cities in the county.
88 counties, cities, counties. So I don't know, Mr.
Now this doesn't interfere with any other project. It would just add one to the list that's submitted.
It would not push any other projects below the line, if that's what you.
And the reason
How can it not?
That's a horse of a different color.
Because number one, every project that scored above 70 would have an application compared to 4.
Okay.
If we reevaluate, if you ask us to reevaluate this project and push it up, you know, that evaluation results in more than 70 points, then that project will be as part of the list of projects.
So the list is not a zero-sum game. If you get over 70%, you're on the approved list.
Yes.
If you fall at 69%, you're below the line, you're not included, regardless of how many projects are on the list. And as we sit here today, we don't have any idea whether this is a 80% or a 60% project.
You know, we have to have the committee reconvene and rank this project again to see where this project is going.
Okay, well, can't we then just ask staff to do that?
My understanding is that isn't a practicality, or I would. My understanding also is that the worst case scenario is it means they have to evaluate one more project, and if it's not a project that is up to their standards, they just reject it. So there's not a lot of downside to it. I also understand that some of this happened because there was a misunderstanding about the scope of what was originally submitted. So maybe you can clarify how that happened, what exactly caused that to precipitate this situation.
Absolutely. The original scope that was proposed in the project description focused on a lot more on the, let me describe, directly below the viaduct, the pedestrian plaza area, right? And pedestrian improvement applications for Metro, they're focusing a lot on the first last mile and linkages. And the revised application, when our office became aware that the scope that was submitted was not what we'd asked for, specifically includes that linkages element. Linkages meaning you have bike and pedestrian safety elements, you have street lighting connecting to those other Tiger projects that I mentioned. So the scope was different. It was partially submitted, but wasn't the full scope.
And my understanding, according to a passing conversation with the department, is that they don't feel they could just evaluate this separately in context, that they'd feel compelled to have their task force reevaluate the entire grouping, which doesn't seem practical. Do we know if that's correct, or is there a way to quickly evaluate this one project and include it?
Council members, this is Dan Mitchell with the Department of Transportation. This matter is really one of timing. There was a misunderstanding with the scope that was submitted, and that timing didn't fit in, the revised scope didn't fit in with the timing of the process that was laid out. The issue is really there was a process established with representatives from all the council offices, the mayor's office, and we want to respect that process. It was established through an interdepartmental task force. At this point, to reconvene a committee and re-rank projects is a little late for that. However, it is at the committee's discretion and the council's discretion if they want to modify that list to add in another project. That project would not push another project off the list in the terms of we wouldn't submit an application. Those applications would still be submitted. The issue would be that would compete with other projects that are submitted by the city and the other cities for the same pool of funds. And our goal in establishing this process and the list is so that the most competitive projects are submitted and compete for those funds.
And I know we approach this a little bit with a certain amount of parochialism. We want our own projects to do well, so typically if we had a bunch of requests like this, we would normally reject them out of hand. But it seems like this one occurred due to some errors, and I think a project that might well be approved otherwise and be valuable in terms of not creating a further budget hole in this project might be worth moving forward. So I would be inclined to move this item forward along with the other changes as amended, recommended by the department. So I would add the revised 6th Street Viaduct pedestrian improvement project along with the suggested items to be removed that were suggested by the department. So that'd be my motion.
So I'm sorry, maybe I'm still a little bit confused. The 70, the ranking of 70 that you talked about, what is that number? What does that represent?
It represents regional significance. It represents first last mile connection. It represents the cost effectiveness. It represents sustainability.
So you score a project on all these factors. They get a certain number of points.
Exactly.
If it reaches 70 points, you're above the line. Then all of the 70-point projects were then prioritized one against another in order to make a ranked list?
Yes.
Okay. So to your point, to reprioritize, to add even one project in, if we wanted to prioritize, it would require comparison against all the other projects. But can't we do that assessment of this particular project on that point scale without regard to how it compares to other projects? Or is that not?
Well,
is that how you develop the point scale or not? Do you do it in comparison with other projects, or do you do it in an absolute sense?
If I might interrupt, my understanding is that despite how we rank them, and I would say for our own purposes, we could say, well, this missed it, so let's just rank it last and submit it. My understanding is we don't submit the rankings. We just submit the projects. So we know where our priorities are, but we don't tell them where our priorities are.
No, I get that.
Correct, or is that?
But the point is, I don't have any idea. I mean, we're here with a request that I'm hearing the first time. I don't have any idea whether it's a worthwhile request or not. I mean, with all due respect, I mean, that's why we have an evaluative process. That's why we go through a committee process. That's why we have staff recommendations. That's why there's a ranking on a scale with, all sorts of objective measures. It's not a question of whether I, like the 6th Street Bridge or not. It's a question of we have professionals who devote their careers to evaluating these things, and I'm not one of those people. So for me to...
Well, I'm an expert, and, I just want to say that.
On most things, that's true. But my point being, I'm agnostic on the project. It might be a 90-point project for all I know. I just don't have any way of knowing that. And so if we're going to say now, well, let's just add it in, I mean, doesn't that kind of say, well, there's a lot of other things we might just add in as well? It's not a question of missing a deadline or something like that, this is a question of it hasn't been ranked. It hasn't been given a point scale. It hasn't been assessed based on these categories of on which we evaluate things.
In 2 years, we will be back here for this same call. Is it every 2 years?
I'm not sure about myself, but I might.
Yeah, I know. I won't be here. Maybe you and I will be fishing on the river. 2 years. So you don't have the right-of-way, you don't have approval to go into the river, correct? To go into the river and go on the floor of the river and ride a bicycle, you don't have approval today.
Currently, that's correct.
Got it. So, but within this time, this is a multi-year bridge project. 5 years it's going to take, demolition and rebuilding?
And the first year of funding for the 2015 call is 2020, so.
So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I love Jose Huizar, and I love the 6th Street Bridge, but I also love the process that everybody's expressed. I hate to disappoint anybody, but I'm more on the side of, because it's not like we have permission to go down there and do this. We're just hoping
we also kind of fouled up the process.
Yeah, but also, and then I'm on the river committee, I want water in the river.
Well, that's one element of the project. That's pending if Metro's study goes forward on that.
So what, if this element doesn't go forward, what harm does it do to the project?
It determines if, there's a high probability that Caltrans and the FHWA will not fund these project elements. They've already been, they fought the city on, they made the city say, okay, we'll pay for this side of an ADA ramp, we're going to make you pay for the other side. So they've been incredibly stingy on this project. So, that's why we're trying to pay it forward and be smart, so we're not in a situation where they come back and say, hey, you designed this, we're not going to pay for it.
And understand, please, I'm not dissing the project or your proposal at all, because you live and breathe this, and you know every nut and bolt that's going to go into that bridge by now, I'm sure. I don't have the first idea what this project element even is. It has something to do with pedestrians on the 6th Street Bridge. That's the extent of what I know. And so for me to be able to make a vote on something that staff has spent, a considerable amount of time working on, it's awfully hard for me to do on the fly. So,
Council members, if I may make
now I have a parliamentary question as well. So we have less than a quorum here. So what happens to this issue?
Is he coming back?
I think he's coming back.
We could advance it on a chair's recommendation.
Yes, you can. I believe Mr. LaBonge is going to return, but in fact, we see him now. What you could do is introduce what your action the committee should take, and then the committee can vote. And after that, if there isn't a majority of the committee voting in favor of your proposal, Mr. Koretz, your proposal can go forward to council as a minority report, and then the recommendation of Mr. LaBonge and Mr. Krikorian can go forward to council as a majority report. Or you could have two communications. There's several ways of proceeding, but in effect, you will have two reports going to council, each one with separate recommendations as recommended by you or by Mr. Krikorian and Mr. LaBonge.
But I think DOT may have a compromise.
Yes.
So just in the interest of time, the approval of this project list is important so that staff can move forward over the holidays, working on these applications so that they can be ready for the deadline. In the interest of this, for this one project, the feedback we've heard is you're interested in having some sort of ranking so you understand where this falls relative to the other projects.
So, not so much a ranking, but a assessment on the scoring system. Yes.
And that assessment, that score is the evaluation of the project team relative to Metro's own scoring system. So my suggestion is that this list move forward to council so that it can be approved as is, and then we return during the break. The committee could reconvene, if it's the direction of the committee, to score this particular project as amended, and then return to council, to this committee in January, and then full council with regard to adding this as a project, should it score above the line, to add it to the list that's approved by council to submit to Metro.
If there's no timing restriction, that given the fact that we have the couple of extra weeks, if that works timing-wise, that would be my motion.
Okay, and no, we don't lose out for the MTA. We don't miss a deadline from them.
We don't miss a
because-
deadline.
Oh, good. I second Mr. Krikorian's motion.
Would that work? I mean, it's still in the pipeline. We'll still consider it, but it, you know.
I think it's a good solution, but we have one more speaker from the public first.
Okay.
Eric Bruins.
Good afternoon, council members. Eric Bruins from the LA County Bicycle Coalition. I do want to echo the commendation of staff for this process is very rigorous, and it's great to see the city kind of using merit to rank the projects against criteria, including the consistency with the city's plans, consistency with Metro's plans, including their new complete streets policy, as well as community input. On those lines, one particular project I do have to call out as not consistent with the city's plans, and that is the proposed improvements on North Figueroa. Currently, that street is both on the city's bicycle plan as well as the Mobility Elements Bicycle Enhanced Network, and the proposed project is number. I believe it's the first one in the pedestrian category. As currently scoped, that project is not consistent with these plans, and so it's very unfortunate because it is such a high-profile project. But it would behoove the city to scope it as a complete street, and so we would encourage this committee to recommend to staff to rescope this project to become compliant with the city's policy documents as we move forward.
Thank you. Kind of a last-minute suggestion. Is there any way that we would be able to look at that in this context?
I mean, I don't know what documentations you have that proves that it's not consistent with this. That I would talk to.
I should bring it up in council so Mr. Cedillo could speak to it. I think that's because he has an interest that may be contrary to what was stated in the council person.
This was one of the most important projects for Council District 1 that, I mean, we had.
Yeah.
I mean, this is.
Yeah, Carlos Rios, LADOT. This job was actually walked yesterday by City Council's, Mayor's Office, City staff to scope and assess the project, and my recommendation is that we work directly with Council District 1 because they're spearheading the elements of this project, and it is in our eyes, it is a complete street. It may not have the bike lane, but we're factoring all facets of what makes a complete street. But we can definitely work with you and Sharon Lowe.
Thank you. So we will move the item as was articulated by Mr. Krikorian without objection.
So we would approve the report as revised to delete the two projects mentioned by DOT and then direct the department to reconvene the pedestrian improvement model subcommittee to score the revised 6th Street pedestrian improvement project and report back in January with the score and a recommendation to include or not include.
Thank you. Well said. And Mr. City Attorney, Mr. Hayes spoke under the previous item, but did not actually speak to the item. He also had a public comment slip submitted. So are we still required to take further public comment? Or should we hear him as well?
Let's hear him.
Okay.
Let him respond.
All right, Mr. Hayes, you have 2 minutes under public comment.
I understand you don't have a quorum and you don't have a meeting. If you don't know that, the rest of us do. This is the third worst scenario with MTA. There's an MTA professionally trained safety operator with a train and a bus and a collision. The worst case scenario is a school bus and a gasoline truck. But if these two professionally trained people cannot evade an accident, what chance do regular people who can barely parallel park have with this train? On January 26, 2007, a 14-year-old boy named Levert Barker was killed on his way walking home from school, understand it goes back to Crenshaw, from school by the Blue Line train that was carrying his closest sister. Not playing, sirs. This is very serious. You've got to put it underground. But let me shift from the blood and gore to some other subject. There's a Crenshaw Mall, King and Crenshaw Boulevard. There's a stop there, 1 block away at a park. There's another stop. You put $40 million into it. The Metro put $100 million into it. $100 million for a one-block walk from a park that's a homeless encampment? This is a boondoggle, it's a scandal, it's corruption, not only running toward the park, but being launched toward the park. So we finally decided to speak out and catch up with you. Labange can walk out. We'll be at his office. Okay? Now, you heard what I've had to say. You've seen this. Look at this. Blue Line train, car, train, whatever. So
I'll have to ask you to wrap up.
Yeah, fine. Anyway, I'm going to take note that Labange walked out. You listen to what he has to say about the repercussions of walking out when we're talking about life and death issues.
Thank you. And there being no other business on our agenda, we are adjourned.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, you stood right on track. First time ever. Well.